Only after being someone's backup did I understand that the feeling of being summoned and dismissed at what was both humiliating and strangely addicting. For 3 years, Victoria's hot and cold attitude kept cutting me deep, yet I overlooked Hannah, the one who actually cared about me. When I finally woke up in the ICU and the truth hit me, I apologized to Hannah right away. Meanwhile, Victoria stood outside the door, bitterly asking me what 3 years of our relationship had even been worth. I lost my memory, and during that time, I threw myself completely into saving Victoria. Loving her with everything I had, I nearly died in that river, but right at that moment on the razor's edge between life and death, I heard her on her phone whispering to her first love, "I only love you. He's just a placeholder." The strange thing was, someone fished me out. I was rushed to the ICU, lying in that cold, suffocatingly depressing hospital room. A memory I had buried deep suddenly came rushing back before I lost my memory. The person I truly cared about was Victoria's older sister. Eventually, I got married, walking down the aisle hand in hand with the person I truly loved. Victoria, tears streaming down her face. She ran up to me and begged, "James, please, just lose your memory one more time." Okay, I really thought I was never going to wake up the river, and late autumn was freezing cold. Biting into my bones, it felt like knives slicing across my skin. I stood on the riverbank, shouting desperately at Victoria, telling her to get back to shore right now. But she wouldn't listen at all. She kept walking step by step into deeper water, as if she had decided to end it all. I panicked. I tore off my jacket and shoes and jumped directly into the river, forgetting that I had never been a strong swimmer. I just pushed through on sheer stubbornness. I waded upstream against the current. Somehow, I managed to get to her side. I held onto her for dear life and dragged her back toward the bank using the last ounce of my strength. I shoved her up onto the shore, but when it was my turn to get out, I realized I was completely drained. I couldn't muster even a shred of energy, and Victoria didn't even look my way. She just reached out for the phone, lying on the grass, her lips trembling. She called out the name that had tormented me for years. "Justin, do you not care about me at all?" I jumped into the river. "And you still won't come?" She had no idea that I was already sinking little by little, too exhausted to even call for help. Then a sharp pain shot through my chest like someone had stabbed me and was viciously twisting the blade around. For 3 years, I had given Victoria everything I could. The only thing I'd left to give was my own life. But the moment Justin returned, Victoria acted like she had completely forgotten who I was, as if I wasn't the one with amnesia. But she was. I sank deeper and deeper into the water. I vaguely saw her fingers moving rapidly across the screen for a second. I actually thought she was finally calling for help. But no, she was answering a call. Her face wet with tears. She said between sobs, "Justin, I only love you. No one else measures up to you, Eric. It's just someone to pass the time when you're gone. Just a way to fill the hours I've spent the last 3 years waiting for you to return." Even as I was sinking into the depths, I couldn't help but sneer to myself, "You stupid woman. If he really gave a damn about you, would he have vanished without a word and run off overseas for 3 years? He's just toying with you, twirling you around in the palm of his hand for his own amusement. Meanwhile, the person who actually loves you, you've practically killed with your games." I was the only son of the Miller family and the sole heir to the Miller fortune. 3 years ago, I got a severe head injury in an accident, and after that, I lost my memory. From that moment on, I fell head over heels for Victoria, loving her without caring about anything else. One time, Hannah got drunk and called me on the other end of the line. She asked me groggily, "James, did you get possessed or something? If someone puts some kind of curse on you, just tell me. I swear I will find some kind of expert to help break this stupid spell." I didn't answer Hannah. I just hung up, because that night Victoria was drunk, and I had to go get her. When I got there to rush this is what I saw. Victoria was standing there, her face streaked with tears, and there was a man standing beside her. He just nodded at me coldly, then casually hailed a cab and left. Victoria, her eyes red, ran after the car for a few steps, shouting his name desperately, "Justin." I was frozen on the spot. Of course, I knew who Justin was. He was Victoria's first love, the one she could never get over back then. He left without saying a word, abandoned her, and went overseas. And now he was suddenly back, blaming her for everything, saying she couldn't wait for him, saying she had the nerve to be with me. Victoria immediately squatted down on the sidewalk, covered her face with her hands, tears streaming uncontrollably through her fingers. I had never seen her cry that hard before. Normally, when we fought, she would just give a cold laugh and ignore me for a whole day until I gave in and tried to make her feel better, but this time she cried like her heart was shattering that night. I brought Victoria home and handed her a warm towel. Victoria, if you still really love Justin, I can step out of the way. She held the towel and cried for a long time until she was completely worn out and drifted off to sleep in a daze. She didn't answer me at all back then. I actually believed that she had heard me and that she finally realized I was her real boyfriend. So even if just a little, she couldn't bring herself to let me go. But I only found out later that night. She hadn't actually heard a word I said. She was just crying too much, too overwhelmed to notice anything else in the end. I didn't drown. Victoria finally snapped out of it and started screaming for help from the riverbank. A few elderly fishermen heard the noise, rushed over, and dragged me out of the water. I was rushed into the ICU. They said I was in a coma, but that wasn't entirely true. I was aware, but I was completely paralyzed like a vegetable. I could hear everything, but I couldn't move a single muscle. I heard Victoria nearby, screaming my name like she had lost her mind. Eric, Eric, you're going to be okay? Aren't you? She was crying harder than I had ever seen. You obviously don't know how to swim. Why did you go, and why I even heard her voice breaking, begging the doctor, please. I'm begging you. Save him. He can't die. That desperate tone in Victoria's voice left me completely baffled. Hadn't she just been on the phone confessing her feelings to Justin? Hadn't she already decided to leave me? So why was she suddenly acting so differently? Right after that, I heard another voice I recognized, trembling with anger, as she confronted Victoria. Didn't you say you cherished Eric? This is your idea of cherishing someone. It was Hannah ever since I had asked her to help me plan a proposal for Victoria. She had blocked me and vanished from my life entirely. But now she was jogging next to the stretcher, her voice raw from crying. Eric, you wake up right now. 3 years ago, you left something half said. The rest of it, I've been waiting for it ever since. So wake up and finish it. I was so exhausted. Darkness crept in inch by inch from every direction. It felt like I was being pulled into an endless night. But right before I completely faded out, I still couldn't help wondering, half a sentence? What half-finished sentence? What was she even talking about? Why didn't I have any memory of that? This amnesia thing was really such a pain. My love for Victoria, to be honest, it was actually pretty simple that day. I saw her from a distance wearing a beige sundress, sitting in the Miller family garden, painting. The sunlight was pouring down on her. A soft breeze blew through her hair. Her hair swayed lightly. That moment was as tranquil as a painting, and it slammed right into my heart in that moment. I knew without a doubt I had fallen in love with that girl in the beige sundress, sitting quietly in the sunlight, painting, and this feeling had been buried deep in my heart for a very long time. Even though I'd lost my memory, I insisted on convincing myself that girl was Victoria. Starting that day, I started chasing her without ever getting tired. The latest designer dresses, rare pieces of jewelry. I spent money on her without a second thought. When she had a sudden craving for fried donuts, I would drive to the next city over and wait in line for her 2 full hours like a good boyfriend just to get her the most authentic ones from that particular shop. Since she had a weak constitution, I started learning how to make soups and rice porridge, figuring out the recipes little by little, hoping to gradually improve her health. She had terrible insomnia. I asked everyone I knew for the best acupuncturist, went to all kinds of clinics. After hearing so much advice, I was practically becoming a semi-expert. I thought I had already done everything possible, but Victoria never seemed genuinely happy. I could tell. Every smile she gave felt forced and strained, that is, until Justin came back on that very night of his return. The insomnia that had tormented Victoria for 3 whole years suddenly vanished, as if it had never existed at all that night. She actually slept peacefully and had a dream. I don't know what she dreamed about. I just saw the corners of her mouth curl up slightly with that gentle, satisfied smile, watching her sleep, so soundly smile, so sweetly. I suddenly felt like having a cigarette. I had quit smoking for Victoria a long time ago because she hated the smell of smoke, but that night I still went down to the convenience store, bought a pack, and smoked 2 of them, one after another. Only then did I go back upstairs after Justin returned. Hannah had tried to remind me, you should spend more time with your sister, take her out to go shopping, see a few movies. Something like that. Hannah was very vague about it. She didn't spell it out, but I got it. She was afraid that Victoria might get back together with Justin. I was actually pretty grateful to her, that girl. Ever since she learned that I had told Victoria how I felt, had started drinking and smoking, and even took up riding a motorcycle, everyone said Hannah used to be such a sweet, well-behaved girl. No one could figure out why she suddenly became a completely different person, but even though I could see her now with a drink in one hand and a cigarette in the other, I still couldn't help but feel that underneath it all, she was still a good person, and that was just her way. She worried about me, but she was also afraid of hurting my ego. That cautious kindness she showed me made my heart feel warm. I smiled back at her. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. Of course, that was just for her benefit. The truth was I had absolutely no clue. The time Victoria came home started getting later and later. At first, she still made it home for dinner. Then she started bringing takeout, eating at 9 or 10 o'clock at night. After a while, she wouldn't come through the door until the early morning hours, still radiating cold air from outside. She said she was working late, and she even brought her laptop back, mumbling something about the Miller family business being especially busy lately, but the excitement in her eyes was just way too obvious. I've stayed late for work before. Working late isn't something to be that happy about, but I just pressed my lips together and didn't say anything. At home, Victoria grew more and more distant with me. The amount we talked in a single day was probably fewer than 10 exchanges. Even when I tried to ask her patiently, she wouldn't open up. Sometimes I couldn't help wondering, weren't we happy before? Didn't we have some good times together on those bitterly cold winter nights? Victoria would crawl into my arms and ask me to warm up her freezing hands and feet. When we watched our romantic movies together, she would sob her eyes out, wiping her tears, and tell me that she hoped we could always be like that. We even went to a temple together and locked a padlock onto the railing. She linked her arm through mine, her eyes so earnest and devoted. How could everything change overnight like that? How did she turn into someone I hardly even recognized anymore? I just couldn't figure out. No matter how much I thought about it, I've always been stubborn. Once I got attached to someone, I had a hard time letting go. Even when Victoria stopped coming home entirely and wouldn't answer or return my calls, I still stayed in that apartment that now only had me in it once in a while. Hannah couldn't stand it anymore and would go fight with Victoria, but it never did any good. Afterward, Victoria would call me to lecture me. Instead, Eric, stop doing things that make me lose respect for you, and don't try to get anything from my sister. At first, I would still calmly explain, but one day Victoria suddenly blew up, shouted at me over the phone, "You think these little games are going to make me forget Justin in your dreams?" It was early autumn at the time. A gust of cold wind swept through, cutting straight to the bone. I was frozen in place. I stayed quiet for a long moment. Victoria cleared her throat and muttered awkwardly, "I didn't mean that." I looked down and let out a bitter laugh full of bitterness. "Victoria, if you don't love me, I don't need you to force yourself to stay with me. Then let's call it quits. Just say the word, and I will go along with it." Victoria didn't respond. I waited a bit more and finally sighed. "Then I'll say it myself." "Victoria, we're done." As stubborn as I am, I'm not unreasonable. A relationship that's barely hanging on means absolutely nothing. But that day, Victoria didn't say anything at all. I thought since I was the one ending it, she would have been relieved, but I never expected that the other end of the line just went completely silent. And then she hung up with a loud click. A few days later, she called again, half drunk and half conscious. Her words were all slurred. "Let me think about it a little longer." "Okay," I sighed. "Think about what I need to get things straight," she said. Stubborn as ever, I used to think I knew what mattered most to me, but now I'm suddenly not so sure. I shook my head. "Victoria, I don't want to keep waiting." Those nights I spent sitting alone in the dark waiting until dawn broke. I've already had more than enough of those. "Victoria, let's end this." I said it as calmly as I could, putting an end to this relationship that had been limping along once and for all. But Victoria didn't say a word and hung up on me again. The next day, she sent me a text with a photo attached of what her bedroom looked like. I've been staying at home. Right after that, Hannah also sent a message backing her up. "My sister is home every single night. Even if she wants to go out after 10, I'll drag her back myself." I could practically see her puffing out her cheeks in that defiant tone. It was obvious between the lines. It was so funny. I couldn't help but smile. "You don't have to go through all that trouble, Hannah, but thank you anyway." As far as I was concerned, this relationship was already finished, but in Victoria's eyes, it was like we had never broken up at all. She started messaging and calling me every couple of days, pretending like nothing had ever happened. She even started calling me husband. That was a name that I used to beg her to call me. And she wouldn't now. She was throwing around like it was nothing. I didn't respond to any of her messages, and I didn't pick up her calls either. But that didn't mean it didn't hurt if during those 3 years, even if there had been just 6 months when she had treated me the way she was treating me now, maybe I never would have been able to say goodbye in my head over and over again. I kept going back to that image, that girl in the beige sundress, sitting quietly in the sunlight, painting the soft breeze blowing through her hair. That moment was like a curse playing on repeat in my head, as if it was trying to remind me just how deeply I loved her, even though sometimes I thought I was a total idiot late at night. When everything was quiet, I would occasionally let myself daydream. What if Victoria could actually change? Wouldn't that be wonderful? But that was just a fleeting fantasy when Justin stormed off overseas again, leaving. In a rage, everything fell apart him leaving. Terrified Victoria, she thought he was going to disappear like he had before for another 3 years. So she went after him with everything she had, only to get shut out. When she came back humiliated, she never reached out to me again until one night. Completely wasted, she suddenly sent me a location pin and a message. Justin, I know you're back. If you don't come to me, I will jump into the river. I knew right away that message was meant for someone else. But she also attached a selfie in the sunlight. She was standing by the river, wearing a very simple beige dress. Her eyes were still so clear, innocent as a deer's. That image blended together with a blurry figure deep in my memory. Little I closed my eyes and had to admit that I was pretty pathetic. I still couldn't let go of that girl in the beige dress. So I went to where she had pinned. I pulled Victoria out of the water and nearly lost my own in the process. I was sent to the ICU. I lay in the ICU for many days, around 2 weeks, completely out of it. During that period, I had a dream. In the dream, there was a girl with soft, round eyes, her eyes brimming with tears. She looked at me and said, "How could you not recognize me?" I was frozen in the dream, and suddenly I remembered the girl I had always loved. So the one in the beige dress wasn't Victoria at all. That person was Hannah. It all came back to me in an instant. So for those 2 years, the person I had been in love with was Hannah. The day of my car accident, I had originally planned to tell her how I felt that day. She was wearing a beige sundress, painting quietly in the sun. Her skin was fair, her features weren't breathtaking, but she was clean and pleasant to look at. Her smile was like a clean spring, but she never got to hear the words I had prepared for her. Instead, she saw me take her sister's hand. I remember it so clearly when she saw Victoria and me standing side by side in those deer-like eyes of hers. First came disappointment, then she slowly sank into despair. She fought back her tears and forced a smile, wishing us happiness. My girl for 3 years, how did she even survive it? Tears slipped from the corners of my eyes without me even noticing. When the nurse saw, she shouted excitedly for the doctor. "Doctor, he's waking up." Yes, I woke up. The real me had finally woken up. As they moved me from the ICU to a private room, I saw Victoria standing guard outside the intensive care unit. Her hair was thrown up in a messy bun. Her dress was wrinkled. Her eyes were red and puffy. Her whole face was frighteningly pale. The moment she saw me, she came stumbling over, tears streaming down her face. "Eric, you scared me half to death." A nurse nearby couldn't help but comment, "You two must really love each other. This young lady has been camped outside the ICU for you for nearly 3 days. She barely slept at all in the past." I might have been completely moved by that, but right now my eyes went past Victoria and landed on someone else. Behind her, Hannah looked just as worn out. Her face exhausted. Her eyes were just as red. She looked at me, tears shimmering in her eyes. "Don't be so reckless again," she sniffled and added in a low voice, "If you had actually gotten hurt, would." Her words caught her throat. She looked down and didn't finish. Victoria saw me to the private room, running around making arrangements for me. But I held up my hand to stop her. "Victoria, could you let Hannah come in here?" Victoria hesitated for a second. Then, after a few seconds, she reluctantly called Hannah into the hospital room. I raised my eyes to look at Hannah. She had changed so much. In 3 years, her long hair that had once reached her shoulders was now cut into a short, sharp bob. The flowy dresses she used to wear had been swapped for leather jackets and jeans, but her eyes were the same, still so clear, soft, and dewy. Like little glutinous rice balls, the sunlight poured in, making the tears in her eyes glisten even more. I squeezed my eyes shut for a second, pushing down the ache rising in my chest. I waved her over when she was near enough that I could make out every detail of her fair face, her skin so smooth and nearly perfect. I spoke, my voice shaking, my throat felt like it was closing up. Hannah, I'm so sorry, Hannah. I remember everything now. Hannah went completely still, her eyes wide. The next moment, she clapped her hand over her mouth. Tears spilled out instantly. She cried softly, but there was a sadness that seemed to come from deep within her bones. Only someone who had been wounded the most deeply could cry that way. My eyes started burning too. I had once made her a promise to make her the happiest girl in the whole world, but instead, for 3 years, I made her watch me love another person. 3 full years. Victoria had never really understood her sister's life at all. For so many years, all of her energy had been spent on Justin. She had no clue that Hannah and I had already developed feelings for each other years ago, long before all of this. And she also didn't know that I had planned to say those words. I like you directly to Hannah when she saw me apologizing to Hannah so seriously, and then saw Hannah suddenly break down, crying. Victoria just stood there blankly, looking completely lost. She listened quietly without saying a word. I laid out everything from beginning to end, using the fewest words I could. Her face slowly turned white, and her breathing grew uneven. After I was done, she swayed on her feet, the tip of her nose, and her eyes were red. She asked in a stutter, "So for 3 years you were with me because you got me mixed up with someone else?" I was quiet for a moment. Then I nodded. "If that's how you want to see it, then I suppose that's true." Victoria staggered again, her eyes darting between Hannah and me, tears falling one after another. "You bastard, James," she sobbed as she cursed me, her lips shaking badly. "How could you actually tell me that our 3 years together were nothing but a mistake?" After struggling so hard, I finally figured out how I felt about you. I didn't say anything to BH. Honest, I really didn't get it why Victoria was reacting like that. She didn't love me anymore, so why did any of this even matter to her now? Hannah shook her head softly. "James, it's already been 3 years. You and my sister, at least you went through it all together. I don't want to hurt her any further." But I didn't respond to Hannah. Instead, I looked at Victoria and said slowly, "When I dragged you out of the river, I was already sinking, right? Then you were still on the phone with Justin. As I sank and sank into the water, I heard you say to him that you couldn't live without him." As I said these words, there was no more anger in my heart, no disappointment, either, only confusion. "Victoria, were you out of your mind? You watched me drown right before your eyes, and now you're acting like you actually care about me." I pulled the blanket tighter around myself, wrapping myself up, my voice barely above a whisper. "Just stop. This isn't you." Victoria's face went even whiter. She opened her mouth as if to explain, but no words came out, because after all, she had done all of these things herself. Hannah broke down, crying again. She came to the side of my bed, standing between Victoria and me. She spoke with tears in her eyes. "Sis, I didn't want to have to say this, but what you did to James was just too cruel." Hannah's voice was raw from sobbing, but she grit set her teeth and kept going. "He nearly died trying to save you. How could you twist a knife in his heart like that? Do you remember that one time when we were little? James actually already saved you once." Victoria went still. I froze as well. I had no idea what Hannah was talking about. Hannah wiped her tears as she kept talking, shaking with anger. "That time those human traffickers were following us, trailing after us. James came over to play with us. At just that moment, he knew it was dangerous, but he followed after them anyway. And then he yelled for help in the middle of the market." Hannah took hold of my hand, her voice shaking, and then one of those men swung a knife right at him, and his hand still has a deep scar to this day. "And you forgot all about it and then treated him this way." Hannah was sobbing so hard she could barely breathe, and I lay in my hospital bed, turning her words over and over in my mind. After a long moment, that long buried memory slowly came back to me. That knife wound Ad hurt so badly, I almost blacked out, probably because it was so traumatic. My brain had just buried that memory entirely. If she hadn't mentioned it, I might have never remembered it for the rest of my life. Victoria seemed to recall it as well. Her face went even whiter. She leaned against the wall and said in a voice full of despair, "James the first forgot about it." As soon as the words left her mouth, she slid down the wall and sat on the floor, crying in complete collapse. How could I have forgotten? Something like that. Hannah bent down and wrapped her arms around me. Gently, you can forget, but I'll always remember for you not long after that I was released from the hospital, Hannah. And I had wasted 3 whole years now. I didn't want to waste another single second. I decided to take Hannah to officially meet both of our parents. The first stop was the Miller family home. Hannah's parents were thrilled to see me. They were over the moon since our families had always worked in the same business circles. They already knew me pretty well. The moment they found out that I wanted to be with Hannah, both of them smiled so wide they could barely close their mouths. But in the living room, Victoria was also sitting there. She kept her head down the whole time. Without saying a word, Hannah's parents went on about how well matched we were, how our personalities fit so well. They kept talking and even started talking about wedding plans. She still sat there in silence, as if her soul had been emptied out. Finally, when I was about to leave, Victoria got up and said she would see me to the door. She followed right behind me all the way to the front door and through the fancy wrought iron gate under the dim yellow glow of the streetlight. I could see in the light and finally understood why she had kept her head down the whole time. Her eyes were badly swollen rings of red, like she had been crying for days without sleep, even though I'd got my memory back and remembered who I truly loved at that moment. Seeing her like that, my heart still ached a little. Victoria sniffled, her nose red. She raised her eyes to look at me, her eyes filled with tears. They actually looked a little like Hannah's, her voice shaking. She said, "James, we were together for 3 years, and you never once brought me to meet your parents." A couple of tears dropped, landing on her pale feet. "Yet you and Hannah have only been together for a few days, and you're already bringing her to introduce her." I let out a sigh. Of course I wasn't completely unaffected back then. I had begged her to let me come see her parents, to make things official between us, to put things out in the open. I always wanted for us to have a real, legitimate relationship. But Victoria would just laugh it off, lean over, and give me a kiss, and casually change the subject from beginning to end. She never once took it seriously. 3 full years, other than the 4 of us, me, her, Justin, and Hannah. No one even knew we were in a relationship. Pretty pathetic, right? 3 years together, and only 4 people to show for it. But her feelings for Justin, everyone knew about those, not just our friends. Both sets of parents knew too. I sighed again. For 3 years, you were the one who didn't want people to know about us. Have you forgotten? It was never me who didn't want to meet your family. Victoria stood motionless, tears falling like beads from a broken necklace, one after another. Before, when I saw her like this, I definitely would have gone soft already. I would have swallowed all my resentment and just choked it back, telling myself again and again she was my woman, and I had to spoil her no matter what. No matter how hurt I would always end up holding her and soothing her until the tears stopped. But now I raised my head and looked toward the Miller's house. All lit up, Hannah was waiting for me in there. Just the thought of her brought a steady warmth to my heart. I waved at Victoria. "You should go back inside. It's cold outside. Don't catch a cold." I turned to go behind me. Victoria called out, her voice nearly breaking. "James." Her voice was full of panic and desperation. "James, the first miss you so much." I didn't turn around. I didn't reply either. I just kept walking. Not long after that, Hannah and I got engaged. Since we had already wasted 3 years, I wasn't going to waste another single day. On the day of our engagement party, Hannah wore a long dress again, her long hair hanging over her shoulders, smooth and light. When she looked at me, her eyes crinkled into little crescent moons. In that tender look, there was room for only me. The engagement party was small. We only invited both families and our closest friends. Everyone was smiling, everyone except Victoria. She downed glass after glass of red wine until she was completely wasted. Stumbling around when the party was over, Hannah drove both sets of parents home first. I stayed to send off the friends who had overdone it. When everyone else was gone, Victoria was still sitting there, drinking. I had no idea how much she had had, but this scene felt so familiar, just like when Justin had left the country before. Back then, she had been just as wasted, stumbling back to our room in the middle of the night, hugging me and whispering, "I'm sorry." Then first thing the next morning, she would be on a plane chasing after Justin. But this time she drank and kept whispering my name under her breath. As I walked closer, Victoria braced herself on the table and stood. "James, did you come here for me?" She lifted her head to look at me for a second. Her eyes sparkled, reminding me of that day. I had confessed to her. Her eyes had sparkled then, too bright, like they were hiding stars, but the sparkle back then had never been for me. In her high heels, Victoria came stumbling over to me. She lost her footing and fell hard onto the ground. When her knee slammed against the floor, she hesitated, and her eyes immediately welled up. She held out her hand, looking at me like a little kid James had hurt in the past. Even if she just barely bumped herself, she would throw herself in my arms and whine James it hurts, kiss it better for me. But in front of Justin, she could be beaten and bruised and still refuse to admit that it hurt now. She was reaching out. To me again, James it hurts, tears running down her face. James, will you take care of me? Please, I'm begging you. Take care of me. I watched her, curled up in a small ball, crying softly to herself like a child who had been left behind. But I took a step back and waved over a server standing nearby. Please help her up and get her into her car. After I gave those instructions, I turned around and left the banquet hall. I also told the driver to make sure she got home safely. Before I left, I even made sure to write down the license plate number. I didn't do it for Victoria's sake. I did it for Hannah. When the car started to pull away slowly, Victoria suddenly rolled down the window and pointed to her heart. James, it hurts so much right here. Her eyes filled with tears. It's been hurting for days, and I can't make it stop. James, what am I supposed to do? The despair in her eyes, I could see it so clearly. How can I make it stop hurting so much? James, the first shook my head. You should go to a real hospital and get that checked out. I'm not a doctor. But I understood perfectly that feeling in the quiet of the night, staring at an empty bed by yourself. Holdini, our chest, because it hurts so much that you can barely even stand up. Even though I had Hannah with me now, I still couldn't forget those nights, no matter how hard I tried, when I had offered my whole heart to someone and gotten nothing back. So Victoria, if you're hurting now, that's yours to bear. You broke a sincere heart. Did you think there wouldn't be any consequences for that? After Hannah and I got engaged, I quickly fell back into my old work routine. I had always been a workaholic, but those 3 years with Victoria, I had felt like I was living under a constant shadow, anxious all the time, depressed, like I had lost my soul, completely unable to get back to who I used to be now. With Hannah standing firmly beside me, someone who loved her own career just as much as I loved mine, having her around, I could finally focus on building a future for the two of us. What I didn't expect, though, was that Victoria actually showed up at my company to apply for a job. She didn't just show up. She passed the interview too and got hired without any issues. Even more absurdly, HR had even marked her as a top candidate. I knew very well Victoria had good credentials, and she wasn't stupid. If she actually wanted to put in real work, she could absolutely make something of herself. But I just couldn't figure out why she would throw away the opportunities at her own family's business just to come work for me. I was annoyed, so I called her into my office to talk privately. Victoria showed up in a proper business suit, this look I had never seen on her before. Her hair was tied back. As well, she looked thinner than before. Her face was terribly pale. I was hired through the proper process. You can't fire me, she said before I could. Her tone was hard and a bit defiant, but the panic in her eyes was practically spilling over. James, her voice went soft and tears started falling. I've never begged anyone for anything, not once in my entire life. I've always loved my little sister, and I always let her have her way. But I just can't let you go. I can't. She covered her face and sobbed, her shoulders shaking uncontrollably. How could I have pushed you away that way? How could I have been so awful to you? Why did it take me until now to realize that you're the one I love? I rubbed my temples. My chest felt tight. That ache wasn't for her. It was for that past version of myself who just stubbornly kept pushing through. I cleared my throat. Victoria, we aren't going to happen. I stood up, grabbed a tissue, and handed it to her. And we never will be stopped wasting your time or Hannah's sister. We're going to run into each other. So save some dignity for yourself. And for me too. Victoria swayed on her feet. Her body shaking. So you're saying that I don't have any dignity left at all now? Is that it? Her eyes were red and harsh, filled with disbelief. I shook my head. She started crying even harder, trying to wipe them away with the back of her hand. James, are you really completely blameless? Her voice shook, but she sounded accusing. When you had amnesia and couldn't remember who you really loved, weren't you just using me as a placeholder? Go ahead. Tell me I'm wrong. I looked down, staring at the tissue in my hand. This hand had rubbed her back comfortingly more times than I could count, had soothed her to sleep through so many nights when she was drunk. This hand got her water and made her hangover soup in the cold winter nights on sweltering summer afternoons. And every time she fell apart over Justin, this hand that held her close, I took a deep breath and looked her straight in the eye. Victoria, can you honestly say, with your hand on your heart that I used, can you say that all of the love I had for you, everything I did for you, meant absolutely nothing to you? It was you who when I was drowning, was on the phone with Justin. It was you who would drop everything to chase after him the moment he called. It was you who treated me like garbage, even as I was protecting you like you were the most precious thing in the world. I steadied my breath, Victoria. Hurting someone who truly loves you as consequences, stomping all over someone's love, also comes back around. Victoria stopped crying. Her face went gray. Her mouth opened and closed for a while before she finally managed to stammer out, "Can I compensate you? Can I make amends?" I opened the office door and motioned for her to go. "That's not necessary, Victoria. It's over. You need to understand what the word over means really means." Victoria stumbled toward the entrance. Every step looked like it took all of her effort. At the doorstep, she looked back again, tears still streaming down her face. "Justin called me." She forced a pained smile. "He told me he's leaving the country again, but this time around, I didn't ask him not to go. I just told him go if you want to." She laughed as she cried. "You see, I can let him go. I know that now. These 3 years, the person who was really there for me was you, not him." I closed my eyes and stopped her there. "Victoria, my love for you died long ago. It died in that river." I forced a faint smile. "And the one who held it underwater until it drowned was you. Don't you remember?" Victoria went still staring at me blankly. After a few moments, she clapped her hand over her mouth, turned around, and ran out of the office, her sobs echoing all the way down the hallway. For a long time after that, Victoria didn't come around again, not until the night before Hannah and my wedding. She showed up at my door dead, drunk, ringing the bell. When I opened it, she suddenly lunged into my arms, grabbing my shirt collar. I was shocked and pushed her away. Without thinking, Victoria looked up and smiled at me. That smile was full of pain. "James, if I hit you on the head with something really hard, do you think you would get amen?" Asia again. I took a step back, my body tensed up. She burst out laughing, even louder. "Relax. At the end of the day, I am still Hannah's sister. I'm not going to ruin her wedding." She looked at me, her eyes full of regret. Tears welled up again. "James, could you please just lose your memory one more time? I'm begging you." She squeezed her eyes, shut, her voice so low I could barely hear her. "James, it hurts. It hurts so bad. Please." A few tears dropped silently to the ground. Victoria said between sobs, "After tomorrow's wedding, we can never go back. Can we? I can never rest my head on your shoulder again. Is that right?" I nodded. "Yes." Victoria opened her eyes, staring at me hard, like she was trying to etch my face in her memory. She gave a weak smile. "James, why can't I just forget you?" She lifted her hand and waved goodbye. "James." She turned and walked a few steps, then stopped her back, facing me. Her voice had a hint of laughter in it. "You used to always beg me to call you husband, but back then I just refused. James, can I call you that? Just this once?" She turned her head in the moonlight. The tears in her eyes caught the light. "Husband." I watched her silhouette fade away bit by bit into the darkness and felt a dampness at the corners of my eyes. But I knew it wasn't the present me that was crying. It was that feeling that had died long ago, sending out one final echo buried in the freezing depths of that river, mourning that it had never been valued when it mattered, mourning that someone had finally seen its value, but it was far too late, and letting out a silent sigh. On the day Hannah and I were married, the wedding was grand and beautiful. Hannah wore a white mermaid-style wedding gown, so beautiful it was hard to take my eyes off her. She was absolutely radiant, full of happiness and grace. I stood at the altar listening to the officiant tell her story, watching the screen as photo after photo of our memories appeared. My heart was filled with nothing but gratitude, thankful that fate had pulled me out of the fog at the very last moment and let me find my way to the person I truly loved. Hannah gripped my hand tightly, her eyes a little red, tears welling up inside them. She was crying like a little rabbit. I wrapped my arms around Hannah to soothe her, but I couldn't help glancing down at the crowd at the main table. Victoria was sitting there. She was wearing a beige sundress, her long hair hanging over her shoulders. Her face was smiling, bright and beautiful, but tears were silently streaming down her face. Someone beside her asked in a low voice, "Why are you crying so much?" Victoria wiped her tears and laughed as she spoke, looking at me. "It's nothing. I'm just so jealous of my little sister. She married the best husband in the world. Time flew by like a galloping horse." And just like that, years passed. Hannah and I had been together for 12 years. Without me even realizing it, our careers were thriving. We had a son and a daughter. Life was steady, and we were content. As for Victoria, she left the country the day after our wedding and went overseas. She was gone for more than a decade. She came back a few times, but each time, she left just as quickly as she came altogether. I hadn't seen her in over 10 years until this year when Hannah had to have a minor procedure. Victoria came back. Just to visit her, that was when we ran into each other again in the hospital room. She was still so thin, her face, just as pale, wearing a beige dress. She greeted me softly, long time no see. I teased her, little you really do love beige dresses. Don't you? How many do you even own? Victoria parted her lips like she wanted to say something back, but then she looked down and didn't speak, just gave a faint, bitter smile curling the corners of her mouth. She pulled a small box from her purse. I have a studio in Italy now. I carved this myself. I opened it, and inside were two little wooden figures. The man looked a little like me. The woman looked like Hannah too. They were sitting quietly side by side, looking calm and peaceful. Victoria cleared her throat softly. I didn't have any pictures of the two when I carved these, so I had to go entirely from memory. I hope they're not too ugly, Hannah and I both nodded. They're beautiful. They look just like us. Victoria smiled faintly. I'm glad you like them. She went over to Hannah's bed and gently smoothed the hair from Hannah's forehead. Think of this as my blessing to you. I hope you two always stay in love and be happy for the rest of your lives. She hesitated, then added softly, and always take good care of each other. Hannah nodded with a smile, her eyes tender. I set the box to the side and asked offhandedly, Victoria, I heard you're still single, still haven't found the right person. She shot me a glance, then looked out the window at the bright sky. After a few seconds, she gave a small smile. Not yet. Being alone is okay. She laughed at herself. Maybe I'm just too picky. I keep hoping to find someone who would be willing to die for me too. Bad I haven't found anyone like that, Hannah. Said a few more things to comfort her, but soon she was too sleepy to keep her eyes open and drifted off. Victoria got to her feet and said she should get going. I walked her down. We stepped onto the grass outside the hospital. The sun was warm, casting a warm glow on her beige dress. The wind blew through her hair in that instant. I felt like I could see that girl from so many years ago, sitting in the sunshine, painting. But now her smile wasn't so bright and fierce anymore. There was more calmness. Hey, ND indifference in it. That's enough. James, go back and be with Hannah, she said with a smile. I nodded and turned to go. The moment I took that first step, I heard her voice softly from behind, murmuring something with a trace of sadness. I miss you so much. Her voice was so quiet I could barely hear it, like she was speaking to herself. If only this world could turn back time. I hesitated for a second, but I didn't turn around. In front of me were my wife and kids. Behind me was a lone, fragile woman, silently burying a love that had died long ago. Love doesn't come back from the dead. You can't rewind feelings and start over. We can only keep moving forward to accept the consequences of the things we did and the love we squandered along the way. I lifted my head toward the sunlight and walked steadily toward the woman waiting for me at that very moment, never looking back again. There is a limit to how much heart you can give. Once you overdraw it, there is no going back. Walking away from someone who doesn't value you is not giving up. It is saving yourself. Do not run after an illusion that makes you feel unworthy, only to lose the one who truly brought kindness and comfort to your life. Stay clear-headed and strong when your devotion goes unappreciated. Knowing when to stop the loss is the greatest act of self-compassion.